Let me go ahead and introduce our panelists to you all today. Thank you guys for coming and being here and taking time out of your work days, because I know that's always a hard thing to do. First up, we've got Marissa. How many of you guys know Marissa? Marissa's a recent graduate last June. She graduated with a degree in visual communications last June 2016. She is currently working as a fellow with the Coffee Oasis Fellowship. And Jordan McGrath runs the Coffee Oasis Fellowship and Coffee Oasis, and he's here. And if you're interested, you can talk to both of them afterwards about what that one-year fellowship program is like. And so this is her gap year experience. That's what she's doing this year. Brittany comes to us with a major. She majored in biology, graduated in 2008, and she's currently working as the engagement director at Patient Health Perspectives. She actually worked here as a study abroad advisor at SPU for a number of years, so it's fun to have her back on campus. Her gap year experience included traveling and working with a one-year Australian working holiday visa. So, good on ya. Trang Lee is with us. She double majored in chemistry and sociology and graduated in 2012. Currently, she's working as a special projects associate for Green Dot Schools, Public Schools, which is a charter school. And her gap year experience included teaching high school chemistry in Chicago with Teach for America. And Jazzmine Oshitoye, she double majored in English and creative writing in 2012, and she's currently an HR assistant and training coordinator at Amazon. Her gap year experience included being a teacher trainer and also teaching English with the Peace Corps in Ecuador. So that's what we've got going for us today. Thanks, ladies. So I'm just going to, what I'll do is I'll ask the panelists some questions, and then I'll open up for questions. So if something comes to mind, go ahead and jot it down, and feel free to ask that when I open it up to you guys for questions. So here's a question. Could you share with us how you decided to take a gap year or do something different with your life after graduating? What was that process like for you? We can start anywhere along the panel.
I can start.
Great.
So in my junior year at SPU, I did some research over the summer, actually with Dr. Pierce. So if you guys, or any of you guys science majors, actually, will you raise your hands if you are? Yeah, so Dr. Pierce is upstairs. Her and I are actually still very close. I did research with her during the summer between my junior and senior year of college. And I just it was just like long days in the lab, and so I would be reading about just books about education. And a book that really struck me was Savage Inequalities, which I think everyone should read it at some point in their life. It just really talks about the disparities in the education system in the US, and just really got me hooked on this idea of what does it take to have an equitable classroom, and what does it take to really serve all kids. So for me it was okay, what are the avenues to explore this idea? And fortunately I had a couple people at SPU prior to me who were also science majors who did Teach for America, so I just networked with them and kind of worked my way in, applied, made it through all of the rounds. But I think it really just started with this curiosity of what does education look like? And I don't think that you have to go far even to see what that that inequality looks like. You can go to South Seattle and see it. Just if you literally go down 5 miles to Rainier Beach, you will see where inequalities are. So I think again starting with an idea and just kind of exploring that, and just reading books and talking to people who have done the experience that you want to potentially seek for yourself is always the way that I would start kind of exploring that.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I will piggyback off of that because I was interested in Peace Corps because of everything that I'd heard, all these great experiences that I've heard from other people. My mother even had told me before that she had really wanted to do Peace Corps and she never did. So I went to, it was a conference of some sort here actually, and a Peace Corps volunteer spoke about their experience, and I went and listened to it, and I was hooked from there. Because it was, number one, it was a great time to do it because I hadn't started my career yet. I was single, still single, and don't have any kids, things like that. So I was it's the perfect time to do it. Number two, all the benefits that came with it You learn a different language. You get to explore yourself and really figure out your skills and use the skills that you've just learned from college. So that was really exciting to me. And then number 3, you get to help other people. So all of those was like, why wouldn't I do it? So signed up for it, and yeah, 2 years later, I was happy. That's the end of that.
Mine is really different than both of yours. I was a little bit more free-spirited and a little less thought out on mine. I had studied abroad my sophomore year and went to England. I'm the first person in my immediate family to have gone to college, and it was a big deal, and I really wanted to be a physical therapist. And so I studied abroad, which was hard to do. It's hard to do in the sciences. And then really took a lot of extra classes in order to graduate on time. So I'd been very focused, worked really hard to get good grades and graduate with honors in biology. And at the end of it, I had everything ready to apply to get to physical therapy school, and decided, you know what, I don't know. I don't have anybody who's been to physical therapy school. I don't know anybody in my family who's even been to college, let alone to grad school. I'm 22 years old. Am I really ready to make this big commitment and take out school loans and dedicate another 3 years to graduate school? And I decided I wasn't. It was pretty scary. And I was really excited about my study abroad experience that I'd had. And I wanted to figure out how I could make that happen again. And so I did a lot of research and realized that I could get a working holiday visa for a year in Australia. Never been to Australia, didn't know anybody there, didn't know anybody that was even on that side of the world, didn't have any friends who wanted to go with me, and decided, you know what, I'm gonna go. So I got the working holiday visa and booked a one-way or around the world ticket that I ultimately didn't finish using because I ended up staying in Australia for so long. But it was very kind of last minute for me. It was a plan that I formed as I went, and it got more solid and much more ingrained in me after I'd graduated. So.
Yeah, mine was also kind of less thought out. Like I was like, oh, well, I've already done an internship. I didn't really think that I was going to do a gap year. But a lot of older people told me, like, I really regret that I didn't do something fun after I graduated. Like, I just jumped into a career and then felt like I was stuck. And I was like, I don't want that to happen. And I still really want to travel. And now, like, after that year, like, I have the freedom. Like, I can travel before, like, jumping into, like, a career and stuff. And I also just thought about it, prayed about it a lot, and just really... when I found out about the Coffee Oasis, I was like, this is the perfect fit for me, and so I'm going to go for it.
It sounds like your path kind of organically chose you, in a sense. Like, you went on the Peace Corps, Jazzmine, but were you ever curious about a different type of opportunity, and how did you land on the Peace Corps? It was just like, no, Peace Corps is it. I just found it. That's all I want to do.
Yeah, sorry, I'm going to be the boring one because I was like, Peace Corps, done. So,
how about for the rest of you? Were you trying to weigh the options of different opportunities that seemed good, and you were trying to figure it out?
I think for me, Teach for America had still has a very good reputation, and it's just a very big brand name. And so I was like, if I'm not doing Teach for America, then I'm not going to do another one. So I think, yeah, like landing on that and like recognizing like just the opportunities that would come after, and any big company that you can think of, there's somebody from Teach for America who has worked there, who is working there. So I think the networking aspect of it was really valuable to me too. So I think, yeah, I was like, kind of go big or go home for me too. Yeah.
For me, I knew about the Peace Corps. I actually knew people who had done the Peace Corps. I knew about Teach for America. I think it's a really personal decision, and so it probably does actually sort of happen organically. I didn't want any parameters, and in science and getting a 4-year degree, and actually for that matter, your whole life you have parameters growing up. And I wanted to actually just be me on my own terms when I wanted to be completely free. And for all the great things for all the other programs, I chose mine because it gave me the most flexibility and freedom to choose my own path.
think what I was kind of choosing between was like, am I gonna work for like a nonprofit, a ministry, because the Coffee Oasis is a ministry, and so like, do I want to be part of a faith-based organization, or do I want to be just like part of a big company? And so that was kind of my dilemma. But the more that I think that the more that I heard about the Coffee Oasis and realized like that was going to be a really good fit for my like skill set, because they had a specific position with graphic design, and being a graphic designer, it's not always easy to find like a ministry or a nonprofit to work at. And so I was like, I want to see what that's like. So that was one of the big pulls for the Coffee Oasis. I was like, I can be like serving people, serving God, and also like getting like actual job experience.
How did you hear about the Coffee Oasis?
I went to the career fair here and met Jordan. And
You went to the career fair? Awesome.
a little shameless plug for that. Yeah, I didn't know anything about it until I met Jordan and Megan, my supervisors now, and they kept emailing me, and I kept hearing more about it, and just realized that it would be a really good fit. And
So yeah, sometimes you just find it in the most, like, that can be kind of an obscure place to think, I'm going to get a fellowship in a business mission focus by going to a career fair, right? Interesting. So I'm really curious to know, what did you actually do in your job? Or your experience? Or did you get a job, Brittany?
Oh, you're specifically
All
asking me,
of you.
okay. Yes, so to continue where I left off, I bought myself a round the world ticket, and with the intention, because I was going by myself, and my parents at this time were not 100% on board on my all of a sudden not going to graduate school. So I bought a ticket for 3 months, and I thought, I'm going to go for 3 months. I have this working holiday visa. If I change my mind and I love it, I have an option, and I'll find a job. I knew that there were programs that would help place me in jobs in Australia, but I decided to just, again, flexibility. I wanted to do my own thing. So I went there with a backpack. I went to New Zealand for a couple weeks, got to Australia, traveled for about a month and a half before I ran out of money, and realized that I actually needed a job because my next ticket on to Asia wasn't for another month or two, and I wasn't going to be able to make it. So I started, I printed resumes, and I walked up and down streets in downtown Sydney, Australia, applying for jobs, and eventually, after getting turned down for many, I got hired as a sales assistant at first at a boutique women's like surf type store on Bondi Beach in Australia. It was awesome.
Awful. That sounds awful.
I mean, there could be worse places to work. So my job was to do retail sales, and I hadn't really done that before. I'd done a lot of internships in science. I'd worked at a nonprofit called Seattle Biomed here, and I just hadn't really had that sales experience. But I thought, hey, I'm in Australia. I'm doing something totally different. I want to do something really different than everything I've ever done. And within a couple of months, I'd been promoted to be a manager, and I was given a car and responsibility for hiring and taking care of 9 stores across Sydney. And I ended up staying for the entire year of my working holiday visa. So I forfeited the last leg of my trip to Asia. But don't worry, I did it later, and I went for a couple months at the end, which was great. So I did have a job. It was awesome.
How about you guys? What did your day-to-day look like in Ecuador or in Chicago or even for you over in Bremerton, right?
My job was to train the teachers of English in Ecuador, which is a really scary task because you're, how old was I, 22, 24, or something like that. And you're coming in teaching 40 and 50-year-olds how to do their job that they've done for like 20 years. Like, hello, I know everything. Not. So that was one of my jobs. Another one of my jobs was to connect with an orphanage that was nearby, and so I did bailoterapia classes with them, kind of like Zumba with the girls there, which was a lot of fun, and had English classes with them as well. And I also had a job at the university there with a college course and teaching English to them as well. And I had another workshop teaching teachers and soon-to-be teachers on the TOEFL. You guys know what that is? Maybe? Teaching English as a foreign language test. So that will enable them to become teachers, because Ecuador had come out with a new law that English teachers had to take that test in order to be qualified to become an English teacher. It's a ridiculously hard test. Mm-hmm. So all of those were kind of my little projects. And of course, there are like little tiny side projects in there. That's the nice thing about Peace Corps, is that you get to choose your own whatever you want to do. You have your main job, but then you have all these other projects that you can work on. So,
yeah. And where did you live?
I lived in Loja, which is in the south of Ecuador.
And what were your accommodations like?
So you live with a host family for the first 3 months. And then from there, you can choose whether you want to stay with them or whether you want to move out and live on your own. So I stayed with my host family for a year, actually, because number one, my Spanish was not good. And I wanted to learn that and learn more of the culture from them. After that year, then I did move out, and so I could have my own dog and stuff like that. But yeah, it was great. It was great both ways, living with a family and by myself.
Yeah, for me, so Teach for America really puts teachers in two different kinds of situations, I guess. Like one would be like in a very rural setting where there's just like very little people, like farm towns, and then the other part is like in cities, so like urban education. So for me, obviously Chicago is very urban. So I taught on the west side of Chicago. So the students I taught were like, I think 99% Black, probably 95% free and reduced lunch, so very high poverty. So inner city school teachers, I think, have the hardest job, They wear many, many hats. And I think that applied to me too during my time. So, I mean, you can think like the array of things that teachers already do. So like the basics being like lesson planning, curriculum building, like actually teaching students, like interacting with parents, administration. Like in addition to that, I think the other part is like literally being like a mentor, like a counselor to students. Like students would call me like their best friend, their sister, their mom, because oftentimes they didn't have that support at home. So that was like another angle of it. But I worked really hard in my 2 years to put together like different initiatives for kids who like really wanted to access, life after high school. And, college is not always the fit. And so like looking at like trade schools and whatnot and putting together a program called Junior Boost was something that I worked really closely with our like counseling team and just the consultants that we brought on board to essentially like prepare our like kids after they left our school to be able to be productive members of society. And Teach for America has a lot of, also like when I was in Chicago, had a lot of leadership opportunities too. So not only can you interact with your own school, but you also have the opportunity to interact with people who also like you moved to Chicago, moved to that city and are teaching, and also like understand like you're super on fire and passionate about like equity and education specifically. So yeah, I think many hats though, for sure.
And then where did you live?
I lived so the first year I lived in Wicker Park, which was 3 miles away from my school. It's like kind of like a hipster town. If I could compare it, it's probably like a Capitol Hill here. And then I lived in Lincoln Park my second year, which is more of like a Queen Anne. So more like family friendly, like more like mid-20s, that kind of thing. You'd find people your age. So yeah.
Did you have roommates?
I did, yeah. So both years, the first year I had 2 roommates. One of them was actually from Seattle. She went to University of Washington. And then the second year, I moved in with a different roommate, and she was from University of San Diego. So, and they were all Teach for America people, which I think is really special about Teach for America, is that you get to form these like really long-lasting friendships, because it's just such a unique experience. Like going to school here is a unique experience that you share with your peers. Similar, like Teach for America is like that as well. I still keep in touch with like 8 or 9 of those like really core group of friends, and we still meet like once a year in a city, which is just really fun, and we reminisce because it's just like a very, very like this like out of world experience, because there's things that you can talk about that like literally none of your other friends would know a clue about. So yeah.
How about you, Marissa?
So I'm like less than halfway through my gap year right now. But about half of it, should I explain the coffee oasis mission?
Yeah, absolutely.
So our like mission is to change the world for homeless youth, and so we have a bunch of youth programs helping people find jobs and housing. We work with kids between 13 and 25 years old. And then we have coffee shop businesses throughout Kitsap County. And so those businesses help fund the youth programs. So it's really cool because it's a community where people can hang out, get coffee, and also support the youth. And we have like drop-in centers where the youth hang out, like at the in the same building as the coffee shop, but like in a separate place. So I'm involved in both of those areas. Half the time I'm doing graphic design and marketing, so working in the office, getting like printed materials, web materials made. And then the other half, a bunch of different things. We have a church that we're connected with, so helping plan things for the church. And we have a book study that we do. So that was one of the things I liked about the idea of a gap year, was because like I realized at the end of college, like I'm gonna miss like being forced to learn things, and I'm kind of still being forced to learn things, but it doesn't feel like homework as much as just reading books. So reading books, volunteering in the youth centers is part of it.
And then where are you living? Like what is that?
Oh yeah,
situation
so
look like
I'm
for you?
living in Bremerton, and there's 3 of us Coffee Oasis fellows, and so the other 2 are doing business as mission, and so they're more working in the cafes instead of doing the graphic design stuff. And we all live in a really beautiful house together in Bremerton, so that was part of the fellowship, as they provided housing for us, and really focusing on community and spiritual growth in that way with the people in the house.
She said a beautiful house. Did you hear that?
Yeah.
So, did you guys get paid for your roles? Yeah. And was it enough to live on?
Yeah. In Peace Corps, you get paid the base, I don't know the actual term, base wage or base minimum wage for the location that you're in. So if you live out in the boonies, sorry, you're not going to get very much. If you live in the city, you'll get enough to cover how much a person would need for their. And I'm a saver, so it's like, can't go out to lunch because I ain't got money. So I actually came out on top, but.
You did.
Yeah.
That's interesting. And you had benefits because you were a government employee.
Yeah,
right?
that's another beautiful thing about Peace Corps. Your health, all of that stuff is all covered. So if you've got a toothache, like, hey, my tooth hurts, what can you do about it? And they'll send you off to the doctor or whatever. If you ever need any kind of prescription, like drugs or anything like that, you can definitely reach out to them and they'll help you out. It's really convenient because they'll just take care of you for everything.
Yeah, what's tricky about, like, or people don't know about Teach for America is that you're not an employee of Teach for America, you're an employee of the school district that you work in. So I was a Chicago public school employee, so I got paid, whatever the rate was at the time for a first-year teacher, I was paid that as well. Yeah, so like any normal like government employee would have like benefits, like you would pay into the pension for retirement, et cetera, et cetera. All of those benefits are like yours as well. I think something that's cool about Teach for America as well is that they give you, I think it's like $10,000 between the 2 years that you can use to either pay for your student loans or for future education, which is something, it's under the AmeriCorps umbrella. So I don't know if Peace Corps has that too, but yeah, AmeriCorps programs have that and Teach for America is under that umbrella. So it's a really nice like perk because yeah, it's just $10,000 in your pocket. It gets taxed a little bit obviously, but you can use it towards, I used it to pay off like a lot of my student loans for SPU.
And you got paid, Brittany, because
Yes.
you were working retail. And then
Yeah.
how did that work? Were you part of the Australian benefit system, and was all that afforded to you?
Yeah,
as
good
well?
question. So part of the Australian Working Holiday Visa, which by the way, if you're taking notes, as an American, you can do it in Australia, New Zealand, or Ireland between the ages of 18 and 30 for 1 year in each of those countries. You can also do it in Europe, but I think it's only for 3 months. So what you pay for it, and I forget what it was maybe a few $100s, but I got a tax ID number. I was able to open up a bank account. It essentially gave me a worker's permit so that I could work above the table and pay taxes and file taxes if I was staying longer, if I had decided to go to school. I would have had a record of employment there. So I was paid a wage, and as my responsibilities increased, my wage went up.
And then where did you live? What did you do for housing?
I found housing at first through an online, essentially like a Craigslist of Australia. I had some very interesting living experiences that definitely tested my patience and made me a much more well-rounded person. So for the first 6 months, I just lived with somebody who I'd rented a room from off of Craigslist essentially. And then as I got more into my role in sales with the company I was working for, a couple of girls that I worked with and I rented a place together. So it worked out in the end, but yeah.
That's great.
And then the Coffee Oasis Fellowship is funded by a grant, so it's great because of the housing provided and a paycheck.
Nice, and it's enough, like you can get by, you can
Yeah.
you can make your car payment or whatever you need to do. Okay, great. So what kind of training did you receive at your jobs? Either before you went out or when you were on the job, like you were, Brittany. What kind of training was provided to you so that you could enter into your role and be prepared?
I didn't get a ton of training. I feel like my experience was, like I said, when I prefaced my conversation, mine was very much make what I wanted to make out of it. And so I got hired because I had other job experience. And so when I went in there and applied, I said, I haven't actually worked in retail sales really, but here's my other experiences. And they were like, well, it's retail sales. It's easy. You just, learn how to use a cash register and you can talk to people. You have customer service experience. I did. I'd worked as a barista for years and worked in a cafe. So they were like, easy, no worries, mate. It was not a problem for me. And then because I had a college degree and I had worked doing other internships and had a lot of work experience compared to some of the other people that were coming through to work in retail, they offered me a management position. And there I interned, not really interned, but shadowed the person who was leaving for about 3 weeks to get a lay of the land and the different stores that I'd be managing and sort of their own hiring protocols and what they look for. And then she was like, you're on your own, 3 weeks, you've got this, you can do it. So I did. I learned how to drive on the other side of the road. I learned how to navigate city traffic. I learned how, what the working system and regulations were in Australia as well, which was great. So it was very much on my own, but I did have a manager who was able to help me if I needed it.
How about you? What kind of training did you get, Marissa, to prepare you?
Not a ton of training. We had a week of this is what the Coffee Oasis is. Here's all of our programs. Really dove into that, but just kind of jumped in, figured it out as I went.
It's part of the beauty of it, actually.
Yeah, and my role evolved more as as time is going on. Just keep adding on more things. I'm oh yeah, I know how to do that now. I'll start doing that and getting a lot of experience. So it's good.
A lot of freedom then in your role to
Yeah.
also do things and try new things and implement.
Definitely.
Nice. How about you guys? Teach for America and Peace Corps have a little bit more defined training program.
Yeah, we had a 5-week training in the summer, so they call it Institute, and so you go and meet other people in your region as well, and then also other people from other regions. So it was actually housed in Chicago. So I think Jacksonville, Florida, Seattle, Kansas City, Chicago, St. Louis, all of those regions came to Chicago to train for 5 weeks. So it was really fun. It was fun to get to know other people, and we taught summer school. So just got trained as we went. Honestly, taught summer school, and then Teach for America is pretty rigorous in their, in their pursuit of training teachers throughout the whole year. So you have somebody who is a manager, like of teacher and leadership development who oversees you as a core member, and they essentially like train you through a bunch of professional development through the year. In addition to that, we had to attend grad school at night in our first year to become credentialed. So that in addition, so I feel like there's like 3 things, right? So it's institute, which is like the beginning part, and then there's 2 2 things that are happening simultaneously throughout the year. So one with Teach for America and one through grad school.
For Peace Corps, you start out 3 months in training, and they teach you, number one, whatever you need to know for your program. So you start out with this huge group, and then you all separate for a few hours a day into your different groups. So like there's a health section, they would go over like the health things. And then my section was TEFL, teaching English as a foreign language. So we would learn about like how to train teachers on new methodologies and what methodologies work, and how you shouldn't focus on grammar, you should focus on how to communicate instead, and things like that, so on and so forth. And then you have language. So you'd go in with a language, you would take a test at the beginning, and they would test out how well you could speak the language. 0 for me. So started with the beginners, and you have to get to a certain level before you're able to actually go out. So they're working to get you to that level. And then culture. Culture is the best one, because that's when you get to go out in town and see the markets and experience the culture and interact with the community and stuff like that. I'm sure there's one that I'm forgetting in there, but those are the ones that I remember. So 3 months of that.
So you mentioned, Brittany, that you had a hard time like explaining this idea to your parents. Jazzmine, it sounds like your mom is on board.
Yeah, she's like, oh, my baby's doing what I wanted to do.
So that wasn't hard for you, but how about you, Trang and Marissa and Brittany? Like, how did you explain it to your parents, and then how did you convince them that this was a good thing to do?
Yeah, I actually had a Boeing internship like the summer before, and it was secured me like an engineering position like right after college. So it was obviously like, I mean, I think like I come from a very traditional Asian family where like we have expectations of like what you do, and we didn't come to America for you to be a teacher, especially in the inner city. But I just was like very on it. Like I just really wanted to do Teach for America so badly, you know? So I think just like showing that like constant and consistent pursuit of that, like that dream really, you know, and I like just was relentless about it. Like I did not let it go. So I think that was like a part of it, was just like really like letting them like see like how much I cared about it, and it wasn't just like a phase that I was going through. It wasn't like just gonna go away overnight. And I think just like them also just like coming with me like on the journey, you know what I mean, like whatever, and that could like literally mean physically or like literally showing them like what does it mean to be a teacher in this like area of the US, like, and just kind of giving them evidence of like the impacts that could be made. And I'm not saying that I could make those impacts like directly, but just like this is what Teach for America is like trying to do, and like I want to be a part of it. So yeah, like taking them along the journey I think was like pretty crucial in that, especially my parents are very like conservative Vietnamese like traditional immigrant family. So, yeah.
My experience was similar. I had to very much work to get my parents on board. In fact, I think they told me at one point I was making the biggest mistake in my life. Which they, after a couple months, they were like, no, you're doing the right thing. We should have just trusted you. But I think it's hard because they'd put so much hope and their own dreams, I think, into me for going to college when they never really had the opportunity to. So I think they were afraid I was throwing it away. So I also was very motivated and very dedicated to make this happen. And I think even when I had friends that were like, no, we're not going, and I was still dedicated to going by myself, I think they were like, she's pretty serious about this idea. We might not be able to talk her out of it. And they ultimately became really supportive. The other thing I did is I did have a conversation with my faculty advisor before I graduated and just said, okay, if I don't apply for grad school this year, which lots of people don't apply to grad school immediately after, maybe they go do other courses, maybe they don't get high enough test scores, maybe they need to intern, whatever. And I said, if I don't do any of those things, am I at risk of not getting in? And she said, no. You just have to make sure that your test scores stay valid and that you are getting an experience that is valuable, and ultimately that you're going to be able to interview well for the reason why you waited. So I felt confident that if I changed my mind down the road and I wanted to go back, I still could. And I conveyed that to my parents as well. So.
My parents were pretty on board with it. The only thing was my mom thought that, oh, maybe you're joining a cult. Like, you better make sure that this is a cult because like, you're living and working with and going to church with, like, all the same people. Like, that's weird. And it is weird, but it's awesome. Like, and I was like, don't worry, Mom. Like, I visited the church. Like, they're normal. They're Christian, you know. And she came and, like, visited the coffee shop, and she's like, oh, yeah. Like, they're normal. So if you get the opportunity to let your parents visit, that's great.
And I will add on, though, that while my mother was very cool with Peace Corps, my father was not. So Peace Corps does have a side reputation that it can be dangerous, right? So my father was like, we're going to get you enrolled in self-defense classes. So did self-defense and got him on board. Of course, he was not completely on board. My mother was a little bit scared, too. So I think it depends on us, you, to really involve the people that you leave at home too, which makes it sound very like noble, like we're going off to war or something, but to loop them in, because it is hard for the people who stay at home to have their babies out doing their own thing, and we're like, Mom, what? Dad, who? So to remember to like call home every once in a while and keep them looped in.
Good point. So, how did your experience influence your career path?
I'll start. I just realized, shockingly, I'm going on 9 years of being out of college. So I've had a lot of time to reflect on how it has impacted my career path and choices. And you saw or heard in my introduction that I am not a physical therapist, so I'll let you connect the dots on potentially where that went. But I decided the biggest impact it had on me is that I was outside of my comfort zone the entire time. I had to rely on myself. I was independent. I was learning all sorts of different things from different people from all over the world, all walks of life. I met lawyers, I met doctors, I met a physical therapist for the Australian tennis team who traveled around the world with the Australian tennis team. I met people who were surfers. I met every single type of person you could think of. And every single one of them I said, what's your favorite thing about what you do? Or what's your message to me? Every single one of them. And they all had amazing nuggets of information. And so the single most important thing that I learned from that trip is that I didn't actually want to be a physical therapist. I loved science. I loved the idea of being a physical therapist, but it was kind of this idea in my head that to be successful, I had to be like a doctor or a physical therapist or something like that. And I realized I was meeting all these people who were successful in so many other ways. And when I was on my own for that long, I really had to face some of my own wants and needs and really understand what was important to me and not just what I thought was important or what other people had told me was important. I really had to form my own views and thoughts and opinions. And I realized I didn't want to be a physical therapist. It's a great career for a lot of people, and it just wasn't going to be the best career for me. And 9 years later, I can tell you that was the best decision for me. Yeah.
Anybody else?
What was your question again? Sorry.
How did taking a year off influence your career path? Or how did your experience influence your career path?
Yeah.
When I left SPU, I graduated with the double major in English, literature, and creative writing. And so my goal was editing. And I wanted to be an editor of a magazine or books in the publishing industry. Wasn't really sure which one, but I knew I wanted to do editing. And I worked for my sophomore year to senior year in the writing center with that in mind, tutoring people on how to write and become better writers and things like that. Then I did Peace Corps and was training all these people on how to be better teachers, what methodology to use, what not to use, encouraging college students who wanted to be teachers, what were the good things about it and how to speak the language that they should be teaching other people on. And I realized that what I loved so much about the Writing Center, what I loved so much about editing was coaching the people, not necessarily the actual editing. And I realized that too because I worked for the Falcon, our newspaper, as a copy editor. I'm a real good copy editor, but but didn't get to work so much with people. And I realized that during that job I was I was kind of grumpy because I would just sit at home with my little manual and like, that's wrong. So Peace Corps was like it was like, oh, that's what I like about editing. And it completely changed what I pursued. So then after that, I pursued HR. And it was really scary because when I got back, I actually started working at Victoria's Secret, which is not HR. And I was like, what am I doing with my life? But turned out great because I did find a job through a buddy who works for H10 Capital. He used to work here, he used to,
Toby?
sorry, not work here. Yeah,
Toby?
Toby, yep.
Oh, that's great.
So he looped me in with Amazon, got me a contracting job with as a training coordinator there. So I got to do more training, and it was awesome. And now I'm an instructional designer at Amazon, and I still get to work with the training aspect of it and work with people. So it definitely completely changed my life for the better.
Yeah, I thought Teach for America would be one of those things I did for a couple years and kind of just like moseyed on to like my real life. But I think like what I like learned is that like, no, like this is like a way of life, like a way of thinking. And I think that is like been the most impactful thing. I'm still, I went back into consulting and market research after I was finished teaching. And so we did a lot of work with Microsoft and Amazon. Those were our biggest clients. And so market research is essentially like a bunch of surveys, like trying to gather data and like synthesize and consult to clients, like what should you do about this service or product? And I just like was not very passionate about it. Like I just remember waking up and feeling like if today's a 7 out of 10, like that's a good day. And I just like was like, gosh, like life is too short to like only live for the weekends. You know what I mean? If it's Monday and you're like, what are you doing this weekend? Like, God, like that is not a way to live. And I was just like, like after 2 years of it, I was like, I cannot do this anymore. And I just kept thinking to myself, like, education is like what I'm so passionate about, and like whatever that is for you, like find what it is that you are passionate about and like go get it, and I feel like I dropped that market research consulting. I had a really big interview at a really big consulting firm in May, which also coincided with the interview that I had for my current job now, and this has been like a really good fit, and I think that like I feel lucky that I've found my like life's work at 26. Like I like know that education is like where I want to be, and like the strategic and management side of it is like what I really care about. So I think that like I always thought that TFA would be like just this little pause, a blip in time, but it's like so cohesively like brought me along this journey of like this is like what I care about, and like I care about kids and I care about schools and I care about like high quality education options for like all kids, So so I think that sums it up.
I know you're halfway through your program. Any insights for you?
Well, yeah, like I don't know how exactly it's going to affect me, but one cool thing that I'm learning right now is just that like being in this year of intentional like spiritual growth, like that's a big part of it. It's been really cool because I've been able to like discern like God's voice more and just like where he's leading me, and just realizing like, oh, like he is leading me more into ministry and being involved in ministry, whether that like means, working for a nonprofit or just being like more involved in the church in the future. Like I think that's definitely changed my outlook a lot.
That's awesome. That's great. Well, I wanted to open it up for some questions in case you guys had anything you wanted to ask. Any of them? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so what was like the immediate transition like coming back from like whatever you spent a year doing and then like, deciding to start applying for another job? What was that transition like?
I can start. It was hard. That's a really good question. It was really hard for a lot of reasons, and I'd be curious if you guys felt like this too. I really got attached to this life that I had created, and I knew it wasn't going to be long term, and I knew that it had a timestamp. But I was really attached to it. So coming back was difficult. I wasn't sure what that meant actually, because I'd abandoned my idea to go to physical therapy school. I'd moved back, but I wasn't the same person as when I left, because not only had I learned career things, I'd also learned a ton about myself. And so my new self kind of didn't fully like match with my old self, and it was a really confusing, hard time for me. And I actually went to the Career Center here and asked them, I met with Patty actually, she's not here anymore, and said, I don't know what I'm doing, like I had this great experience, I know I have a ton of transferable skills, I don't want to go to grad school anymore, but I don't know what this means for me, I don't know what my career path is. I didn't have this like epiphany moment of I'm going to do this. I just knew I'd had this really powerful experience, and she helped me think through some of my options, and actually really helped me identify some potential areas to pursue, including working and study abroad, which I then did for just over 3 years here at SPU. So if you are considering going and doing a gap year, the transition time coming back can be a little bit hard. It can be a little weird. You experience these things that none of your friends maybe know, and your family doesn't quite understand, and they're really powerful, and they really change you as a person, and potentially your entire career outlook, and everything that you did in college might be a completely different trajectory than when you come back. So I would definitely encourage you to connect with a career counselor or a coach or somebody to help refocus your newfound energy.
Yeah, I agree with that. It was really hard coming back. I definitely felt like I had, made a lot of friends in Chicago. Like, I definitely felt like I was becoming like a very good teacher. So it was very challenging coming back. But I think the key is I think really seeking out like mentors that you really trust will guide you. And that like includes like your professors here too. Like I felt like I had many conversations with a bunch of professors here, like from an array of classes, like literally from like UCore, which do they still offer here?
They do, yeah.
UCore, okay. UCore all the way to like my upper end like chemistry classes. But I think I keep feel like I'm selling Teach for America. It's because I want more SPU people to go and do it. What I think what's great about TFA is that like I said earlier, like any company that you can think of, like literally any company in any industry, there's somebody in TFA who has worked there or who has worked there or who is currently working there. So I think literally connecting the dots is super important after you're done with the core. For grad school opportunities or finding a job in some other field that you didn't think that you would work. So a lot of people make really big jumps. So they'll go from teaching to consulting, or teaching to real estate, teaching to grad school for medicine. So yeah.
Yes, difficult. And a lot of people from Peace Corps also deal with reverse culture shock, coming back to America where people have so many amenities and everyone has cars. Who has that? And money, and nice clothes that don't have holes in them, and things like that. So that part for me was actually not hard. I was like, yeah, America, I'm back. But the hard part was dealing with family again, because like Trang said, they haven't gone through this experience with you. So it's a little bit weird to come back to people who know the core you and not have them understand that part of you. So number one, it's really important to have some kind of support system, whether it's people you've gone with on this trip, or whether you just look online, honestly, for I just came back from this random thing and I need, I feel this way. Someone will have a blog on it. And it makes you feel better. So it was difficult because of family, and then it was also difficult job searching. The nice thing about Peace Corps is that they do kind of prep you to come back by getting your resume ready and getting you thinking about all the projects that you've done during these 2 years. It's easy to forget about them. So it's nice that they have that time set aside to kind of readjust you. However, when you come back, you actually have to apply to the jobs, and that can be really scary. because number one, anytime you're looking for a job, you're gonna get rejected a lot, and it hurts your heart. Like, I'm a great person, just hire me. But you just gotta keep putting it out there. And one thing that I did find online was someone said that you have to think about every no as something you had to check off before you get to the yes, which was like, mind blown. Like, thank you, I'm just doing what I'm supposed to do. No, awesome, on to the yes. So that was really hard. And then living with family again too, like just not having your own space, because in these programs you live by yourself towards the end, and then coming back to now you have your roommates, which are family, and you can't like be angry and stuff because they're family. So it's hard to adjust to too.
Did any of you guys end up going to grad school, or? Yeah, I didn't get that.
No.
Yeah, there's, so Teach for America, every single city has a partner school that you can get a master's degree with the second year that you are there. So everyone does the initial credentialing the first year, but the second year you have the option to continue on to do your master's. So I would say like half of my friends did it and half of them didn't. Just, some people didn't want to stay in education afterwards, so they didn't see the point of it. I didn't do it, but I have plans to go back to business school. Yeah. Oh, sorry. That was.
Oh.
Did anyone else want to answer that? I just pointed to him. Sorry, that was like so weird.
And I kind of have like another question for people that didn't end up going to grad school. Do you feel like your year off influenced you not? I know like for you it kind of influenced you not wanting to go back. Anybody else like experience that?
It actually, I did want to go back for a while, but for something different. But ultimately, my career path has just changed so many times that I'm at a place now where I probably won't. But I actually thought that I would go back probably for business when I came back. I thought I would do business. But yeah, ultimately, I just kind of got into the working world and didn't feel like I needed it at that point.
Yeah, I love SPU, but once I was done with SPU, I was like, these guys, I ain't never come back to school. So when I came back, the nice thing about Peace Corps though is that they give you, I don't know how to say this eloquently, but like plugs into different schools. Like a lot of schools have various programs for you, so that if you have done Peace Corps, then you get like a discount or free rides at some places. So definitely check that out if you're interested.
I think that's just like a fear of mine is like not going back if I take it.
I mean, it's totally up to you.
Yeah,
It's
it really,
totally up to you.
I totally agree with that. Like what are you interested in? Maybe that's the place to start.
I am psychology.
Psychology. Yeah, see there's, I think Teach for America, like it's not a teaching program. I think that's what it's advertised as. It's really a program that prepares leaders to advocate for education. So there's a lot of people who do not end up, like I'm not a teacher anymore and I don't plan to ever go back to the classroom. Like I want to stay in education, but there's a lot of people who go to med school, a lot of people who go to business school, law school, like you name it, like there's somebody who else has done it. So I think it's like definitely like personal like initiative in terms of like really seeking that out, but there are opportunities to seek it out, like for sure. Yeah, so I wouldn't be fearful of that.
And to Brittany's point, just as a last little comment, I would say that it's more about your validation for taking that time off when you speak to a school or an employer or whatever it is, why you took that time, what you did during that time that was really value added, and being able to present that in a good way.
That's good advice.
Sorry?
Yeah. Just what advice do you give to students who want to take a gap year?
Do it. No, in all reality, I think, again, it's a very personal decision what you want to do. I think what option you choose is your biggest question. So my advice would be really spend time researching and thinking about your options and figuring out the best option for you, given your interests, your personality, what you think you thrive in, what type of environment. Do you want a little bit more training? Do you want to just be thrown into something and figure it out? There's options for there's every type of option available, and there's options that we haven't even talked about. You could teach abroad. You could go and intern abroad. You could go and do a work abroad program where you actually get paid, not like an internship, but that is organized for you so that your housing is already arranged and you already have jobs lined up. There's numerous options. You could do grad school abroad, actually, and in some cases it's really affordable to do it overseas. So my advice would be, do your research and figure out what the best fit is for you, but there's a lot of value in having that time to separate from when you're 4, you start preschool maybe, until you're 22, you're in school, and you have a lot of growth that happens in college, but you also have a lot of growth that happens afterwards, and you might be surprised at what it does for you and how it changes your views of yourself and your wants and your needs and what's important to you moving forward in a partner, in life, in jobs, everything.
Yeah, I agree. Like, find something that gets you super, super excited, and like something that you're like, if I pass up this opportunity, I might never have this opportunity again.
That's also true. I want you guys to have an opportunity to say something, but now being 9 years out of college, I always thought that I'd go live abroad again or go work abroad, and I'm married, I own a house, I have a successful career. For me to upend and quit and just start over and go do something like that, I could do it, but it's a big change and it's a lot harder, and I'm really thankful that I did it when I was younger. And you mentioned that you talk to older people who said, you know, you're at a time in your life when you can. I kind of discredited when people said that to me. I was like, whatever, I'll do what I want. No, you are. You really are. If you can figure out a way to make it happen, it does get a lot harder as you get older and get more commitments and get more into your career and maybe have a partner or buy a house, all those things.
Yeah, I think they covered most of it. The only piece that I would add to that is really evaluate what you need. You know what I mean? Like, what do you need to make this decision? Is it a good choice for you? Is it not? What are the factors that would make it a good choice? What are the pros or the cons? All of that, which is like the really unsexy part of it, because you want to just like, yeah, go do, but you need to think about those things.
Another question? Yeah.
So the biggest fear that I have with just kind of taking some time off and doing some self-discovery is the financial planning part of it, and having that risk factor of not going straight in and getting like a full income, because loans and stuff, you know, grown-up things. So how much like pre-existing like finances did you have to like come up with to support this that impacted your ability to have this experience?
This is my favorite question, and I'm glad that you asked it. So I might have mentioned I was the first one to go to college, and I actually worked / got scholarships / took out my own loans for all of my 4 years here at SPU, and you guys know SPU is not a cheap school. So I actually graduated with quite a bit of school loans, and it was a huge factor in what I was going to do. So I graduated. I worked all through college. I graduated in June. I spent the next 6 months and I worked 3 jobs to save up every penny I possibly could. I lived with a friend, and then I eventually moved home up towards the end of the summer, like maybe September-ish, and spent the last 3 months living at home with my family. Luckily, they lived in the area, so I was able to do that. I put every penny aside, and that was my foundation to get me going. And then obviously, you heard me say I ran out of money after the first few months of living and traveling abroad, and was a huge motivator in getting a job as quickly as possible. And then the job that I had paid my expenses while I was living abroad, and I was able to save enough to continue traveling in Asia afterwards. The reason it's my favorite question is because I get asked all the time. I manage a team now of young people, actually. A lot of them are in their early 20s, and they always, when I talk to them, they're always like, we could never do that. We couldn't do it. We couldn't afford it. Yes, there are definitely situations when you can't, but you'd be surprised, especially as you get older, you adapt to your financial level. Mm-hmm. So however, you might get like a great salary, and it might be $25,000 a year, and you'll be fine, usually. And then maybe you get up to 60 or 70,000, and your lifestyles change to match that. So what I'm saying is, yes, it's hard, and for some people it won't work, but it's a lot about what you're going to prioritize, how you're going to save your money, and what's important to you in order to make travel a priority.
Yeah, I had a huge fear about my loans, like throughout my senior year, but something that they didn't tell me until like the very end was there's a thing called income-based repayment. And so because of that, I don't have to pay my loans this whole year that I'm in this internship because I'm getting paid on a stipend, and so I'm getting paid like low enough that they're like, oh, you are so poor that you don't have to pay back your student loans. So that's like been a huge blessing because I'm able to like save up my money and then start paying that off later.
I did the same thing.
Yeah. Teach for America is pretty like well established in the sense that there's a lot of financial like help. So you know, your loans are deferred the entire time that you're teaching. So for the 2 years that you're there, it doesn't like accumulate interest at all, which is really nice. So you leave with $10,000, you come out with $10,000 in loans, and you're paid the same wage as a Chicago public, or in my case, a Chicago public school teacher, which I mean is not like a fortune. You're not, running up and down on a yacht on Lake Michigan, but like it's definitely enough to like. I came out like saving a ton, and yeah, so it's definitely doable for sure.
Did not have money saved up, definitely not. Worked through college, and but the same thing. Trang said, Peace Corps, your loans are deferred. In fact, I believe Perkins loans are forgiven for Peace Corps, so if you have those, sign up for Peace Corps. And then after you come back, there's a grace period. Same thing. Mm-hmm. Took way too much time during that grace period to just chill out. So when you come back, maybe look for a job sooner. But yeah, so you come back and you get a readjustment allowance. I believe it adjusts every year, so I don't know what it is now. But you do get like a big chunk of change, and then you can start paying back loans and stuff like that from there.
Well, we are at time.
No.
We had another question back there. No, okay. Well, the panelists hopefully can stick around for a few minutes to chat with you if you have additional questions to share. Thanks for coming. Hope to see you at a bunch more sessions this week.